Okay, we're here with Bill Merkeles with BrainMaster Technology. So, hey, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for
having
me.
What is your expertise? What is it you focus on?
Basically, we're a company who manufactures an electroencephalogram, but it's much more than that. We go to cutting-edge technology that gives us the capability of imaging the brain in real time, comparing it to a normative database to give a licensed practitioner information on the client in the chair almost immediately.
So, would you be able to talk to me about what's actually happening in a person's brain?
Gotcha.
What's your expertise?
What I can refer to is what does their brain look like in a 3D image that lets us substantiate why are they having the symptoms. What do we see? What does a symptom look like if somebody's dealing with an insomnia circumstance, if somebody's dealing with a situation where they can't focus, they can't pay attention, they can't sleep? We then see symptom or the residual effect of that in the brain image.
So when a person can't sleep or has, what other things would you say? What would you name off?
Lack of focus.
Focus.
Anger, mood issues.
Anger and mood. Okay. So you can tell me, so we can see there are certain patterns, neurological patterns that happen in the brain that you can detect and map. When a person experiences those, what?
Those circumstances, those symptoms that are a residual effect of possibly an injury in their past or in either an acute or chronic circumstance. Could have been years ago.
So what are the typical things that a person who's had a brain injury of some severity, what are the typical things that they experience?
Oftentimes it's literally no ability to sleep or have restful sleep. No ability to focus. No ability to control emotion so that something can set them off where a person that's in a normal circumstance may be able to come back down or calm down. They tend to have a symptom that they can't.
What is that like? Have you heard about experiencing volatile emotions they couldn't control but other people would? What have you heard stories of? Is it that the emotions do they really feel the emotions so strongly that they are overwhelmed by it? Or is it that the emotion just happens? Oh, I didn't realize it happened.
A little bit of both.
Really?
And actually also the inability to inhibit, if that's the term that somebody wants to use. Is that something that a person without injury background oftentimes can control the level that emotion gets to? Somebody that's had damage, has had TBI, traumatic brain injury, oftentimes can't control that.
Can't control what?
The mood that could be resulting from it. Either it could be a deep depressive or it could be a very aggressive type of mood. It's different for different people.
So you can tell that the brain, there's different functions, different activity in different areas of the brain that correlate, that what with those experiences.
So basically with our technology, by being able to map it and compare it to that normative database, we're seeing what frequencies, what location to what severity the brain has changed from the norm. Because it's changed, now all of a sudden we have a pattern that when you look at different, let's use football players, and you see the same patterns over and over from repetitive impact type circumstances, that those patterns tend to start piling up. That as we're doing imaging and we're comparing to that database, they tend to have the same type of pattern over and over. Now, there could be a variety of different symptoms because of that pattern. However, it's very seldom, almost never, do we see them within, let's say, a plus or minus 1 of the norm. They're on the outside, they're an outlier, they're 2, 3, 4 standard deviations from a normal, healthy brain at that age.
What kinds of things do you see in it? I mean, I'm sure right now we can probably cut to a picture of what you were going to talk about, of the brain scans, but what are we talking about? Like, imagine we're seeing a brain scan. What are we going to be seeing on it?
So, okay, great. So, for instance, there's a specific frequency called delta, which is 1 to 4 hertz. Now, this will get a little technical, and we may see, for instance, in the frontal lobe, a large red diffuse spot that's moving and kind of arranging itself around
Yes.
the whole frontal lobe or maybe central motor strip. Well, that red represents 3 to 4 standard deviations from the norm of that frequency. That slow wave activity is basically the residual from the impact, the injury.
Well, you're saying, so if we're looking at a person who had a brain injury of some sort of impact, you're going to be seeing some sort of color.
Right.
And the color degree is going to be
Is
is going to mean how many deviations they've
Right.
moved from the norm.
Yep. How different is their brain from a healthy brain?
Okay. And what does it mean by different? More activity, less activity?
It could be either. Depends.
Okay, so that's the currency we're discussing, is how much or how little, more activity or less activity.
Right. So oftentimes when the slow waves, we see more, but in the waves that the majority of us would use for processing, mathematics, comprehension, communication, that tends to be less. So they have less of that, and their brain's resources are being all focused on that slow wave activity, trying to inhibit it, but it's not succeeding.
What do you mean by less? What do you mean by less then? Are you saying that people who have had a brain injury will have less ability to do certain things like calculative,
right? Mathematics, memory, processing, comprehension.
So, across the board, that's a pretty accurate generalization.
Yeah.
So brain injuries are correlative to a decreased ability for
cognitive function.
Cognitive function for arithmetic.
Sure, arithmetic, reading, overall comprehension, memory skills, even things such as writing and dexterity and such.
Doesn't that depend upon the area of the brain that was impacted?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So so what are the different functions of the brain generally? What are they for? Different areas of the brain, what are they for? Imagine we're talking about the top part of the brain here.
Okay. But again, now we're going into more of a neurologist's discussion.
Just generally, what are they?
Right.
I mean, you're seeing activity, different parts of the brain. What are those different parts of the brain doing, generally used for?
Okay. So your frontal lobe is a lot of your executive function.
So up here. Okay, up here. Gotcha. Okay.
Central motor strip is a lot of sensory and motor.
Where's that?
Function, right along the middle.
Okay.
Sensor motor
gotcha.
strip.
Okay.
A lot of your parietal activity is a lot of where your memory and things like that are function. Your temporals are a lot of language and communication. And it's much more complex than that, though. It's not that simple.
Okay.
The key is when you have injury or you have impact, oftentimes you see a diffuse spreading of specific frequencies. So slow wave activity, for instance, can spread across a couple of those areas. So it's inhibiting all of those functions.
Slow wave activity means
like
that your brain function is slowed down.
Sort of. Basically, there's different frequencies. The brain makes all of them. It makes delta 1 to 4 hertz. It makes theta 5 to 8 hertz. It makes alpha 8 to 12 hertz. It makes low beta 12 to 15. And it goes on and on all the way up to gamma.
All of those are different things the brain emits.
Right. And they're not a good or bad thing.
They're just used for different things.
Different purposes and different appropriate circumstances. So you may have more theta if you're trying to be creative and an artist is doing something. That's a good appropriate time to have theta. The problem is if you have an injury and you have too much delta and theta all the time, when your brain's trying to do a complex task, now it's struggling because it's not able to switch. We lose the flexibility or the plasticity to go to where it has to go for that appropriate task we're trying to do. It's caught, it's stuck in a pattern that's inefficient for what we're trying to do.
That's fantastic. So you might have two different things. Overactivity of one different wave, i.e. function, creativity, or you might have not enough.
Right.
So both. So you could have people like...
It's all the appropriate amount at the appropriate time. The right balance is what we're looking for.
Really? And so you can see that activity, and that's by seeing that activity is how you can measure what different parts, what different parts are either overly functional in certain ways.
Over-aroused or under-aroused in a rested state. So the normative database is based off of a healthy brain, a lot of different cognitive and different type of Psychometric testing's involved in putting a normative database together, usually a large university-based study type of thing, thousands of people type of thing. And then they'll get down to a set of norms, somebody that hasn't had a head injury, somebody who hasn't been on a pharmaceutical, somebody who hasn't had any of these different circumstances that would throw them out of the norm set. Once we get a healthy norm, we have a 0. We have a set point. And then our goal is to look at where is somebody outside of plus or minus 1. So we give the brain variance. We don't expect everybody to be the same. We want them to be out within plus or minus 1, so about 65 to 67% variance of the normal population is okay. Once you start going 2, 3, 4 standard deviations from that norm, we know we have a problem. We have usually something in the brain is either caught, stuck, or damaged.
So caught, stuck, or damaged. What would caught mean?
Caught mean they're literally stuck in a loop. So let's use an example for something like a chronic pain client. Let's say their physical issue had been taken care of surgically or something. They no longer have a nerve impingement or something, but they're still saying, "Doc, I still have the pain." Well, what oftentimes happens is the brain's caught in a stress pain cycle. They've had this for 6, 7, 8 years. They get it taken care of, but their brain doesn't really realize it's been taken care of. So they're caught in a loop. They're stuck in a loop. Then you can image it and see it where in the brain that's happening, what frequency it's happening at. And then there's therapeutic alternatives to help teach the brain a new healthy pattern to break that cycle. You break that cycle, oftentimes symptomology disappears.
So we can teach the brain through
feedback mechanisms.
Well, you can detect what's happening in the brain. What we're going to do about it is a different question.
Sure.
And you just suggested that there's ways you can retrain the brain by normal psychology and things like that, right?
Or yes, there's more active modalities than that, but yes, absolutely.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. So there's things we can do. Those are a couple of them. And so so how exactly is it helpful for prescribing certain fixes? How is it helpful exactly to see? Why is it helpful to see what's underperforming, what's overperforming? How can we compare the data to informing what we can do about it?
Well, because being able to baseline and seeing where somebody's at when they first come into a clinic,
yes,
regardless of insert modality here, regardless of the type of technique they're going to try to use to fix it, we have a point to say here's where your brain is, and then we have a point how to measure to see whatever modalities that are in between, are they working? Is that brain heading back in the right direction?
By modalities, you mean techniques, things we can
techniques,
do. Okay, so
therapies,
so you can,
nutraceuticals, whatever. Could
so
be
you
all
can
kinds of different
have
things.
a baseline. Here's how you came in. We do a few things, do a few tests, and then you can measure changes.
Correct. Track changes.
You said, how can a brain map help inform what we can do about it?
Because it's giving us almost like a GPS for which direction do we need to take this brain to get them back towards healthy or efficient.
You can try certain techniques and see if it's working, helping or not. Okay, that makes sense, but then what does a healthy brain look like? And you said that in the map you might have overactive or underactive, and you can measure those different sectors of the brain. But how would you describe a healthy brain then?
What is the very easy description of what our goal is?
Sure.
So a person sitting there hooked up, they're in a nice idled, relaxed state. Their brain is basically ready, efficient, has proper resources to be as flexible as it needs to be at a given time. On the screen, that's going to show up that it's going to be uniformly one specific color. That's going to be within around that plus or minus 1. Anything within that region is green. So our goal is in time after therapies that we can take a brain that has some type of specific pattern that's non-efficient and move it towards an efficient brain that will show up all green.
So a person who's at rest, getting their brain scanned by Brain Master, they're thinking of nothing, they're trying to be at peace.
Right.
But in fact, their brain scan shows that there's activity happening anyways. Is that the idea?
Yes, sort of. But don't think of it as thoughts as activity. We're not worried about what you're thinking about.
Yes.
We're talking about the functionality of what's actually happening within these frequencies in the brain.
So functionalities are things that are happening without your awareness then?
Correct. These are subconscious, yes. So a good example is if somebody gets injured and let's say you get a bruise on your arm.
Right.
Does your body know you have a bruise? Yeah, you feel pain, right? Do you know how to heal it?
Of course not.
Of course not. It'd be what? What would you consider that, a subconscious type
Right.
circumstance?
Yes.
It's that same type of scenario we're looking at with a brain injury.
Right.
You don't get to actively fix it, but by seeing where it is, what frequency it's based on, if we can give the brain additional information to help normalize the activity, that's what we're doing. Just like if you get injured and you put ice on your elbow, you put it on there because it helps reduce inflammation, so it does what? So it heals faster.
So then we can detect what's happening in the brain that we would never be aware of.
Or it has happened if it's injury based, if somebody's gotten a concussion or something.
But your map is of what's happening in real time, right?
Right.
So we can tell what's happening in the brain without our awareness of it. And so the idea is that things might be happening in the brain, activity might be happening that's not supposed to be happening, i.e. when we're not cognitively causing it. Is that the idea?
Sure.
What am I missing?
That really what we're looking at is there proper regulation in the brain? Is dysregulation happening?
Right.
Can we then detect and determine a way to re-regulate activity so that it's proper and efficient? Does that make sense?
Yes. Basically, I hear you saying is basically we're seeing if the brain is producing things it's
At
not
an
supposed to be.
appropriate manner and time
Yes.
is what we're looking for.
So you can measure that, and then certain techniques, modalities can be done that are supposed to, we think, will help that, and you can measure whether it is or not.
Correct. Basically, our goal is that we initially measure it, we compare it to a database, we then can track and validate if other modalities are helping that brain become more efficient and re-regulated to a healthier position. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. There we go.
Good deal.
Good deal.